Hello and what's up guys, Medium Guy here and welcome to the next video in the video series dedicated to Caddy. In this video we're going to see how to implement API key authentication in Caddy, so if you want to learn more, stick with me. So as you can see in this picture, as always we've got our clients making requests to our backend services through our API gateway, which in this case will be our Caddy server. So actually you can see that when sending the requests, clients will actually send an API key. So the requests will be initially received by the Caddy server. It will check in its defined API keys. It can be a list configured internally or an external service that will be handling our API key validations and actually letting Caddy know if it's supposed to actually proxy the request to the backend services or send some responses back to the client with some defined status codes like 403 or 401 or things like that. So in this video we're going to actually implement the internal list of the API keys that are allowed to make requests to our backend services, but using features like forward auth that comes out of the box with Caddy server itself. You can actually implement the external API key authentication server also. So now that we have a total overview of the thing that we're going to implement, I'll actually move to the VS Code. Right over here you can see that I've got some configuration files prepared to demonstrate this whole thing, and actually I'll put all these files in my GitHub repository, for which you can find the relevant link down in the description section of this video. So as you can see, I've got a Docker Compose file. Right over here I've got two services, one I've named backend, which is an echo server that actually echoes back whatever request that it receives, and next right over here I've got the Caddy server, which is using the Caddy's official image with some recent tags, and I've set the restored policy to actually let the Docker engine know when this container gets stopped by any reason, the Docker engine will actually try to restore this container to maintain its up status. Next, right over here on the environment variable section, by setting the time zone environment variable, I'll actually be able to set the time zone inside the container that will be holding my Caddy server itself. So right over here on the port section, I'm mapping the port 80 and 443 to exact same ports inside the container. So as a result, a client will be using the host machine's IP address to actually communicate through these two ports with the Caddy server that will later configure to listen to these exact two ports. Finally, right over here, I've got the volume section. I'm mapping the ./Caddyfile, which will be my configuration file for Caddy, to initially look for this file to configure itself when it's trying to come up and start serving. And lastly, right over here, I've got two directories that I've mapped to inside the container. Also, Caddy will try to use these two directories to actually store its data and any configuration that it will be creating. So if I move to the Caddy file, right over here, you can see on the global section, I'm setting the automatic redirect from the HTTP to HTTPS to off. So as a result, I'll be able to make requests to the HTTP port also. So next, right over here, you can see that I'm configuring the Caddy to listen to exact same ports that I mapped on my Docker Compose file. And if I move down right over here, you can see that I've got a handle directive that is actually listening to /API/star. So any path that will match these pattern will be served by this handle block. So right over here, I've got a matcher that is actually looking to the header of the requests that will be received, and to be exact, it will look for the authorization header, and if the values are these two, bearer key 1 or bearer key 2, this matcher will actually return true, and later we can use this in order to proxy our requests to our backend services. So I'll move down right over here. You can see that I've got a reverse proxy directive that I'm using the exact same matcher to actually match my authorization header, and if this matcher returns true, the request will be proxied to the HTTP backend on port 80, which is exactly the same name that I gave to my echo server in my Docker Compose file. So as you might already know, because these two containers will be using the same Docker Compose file to be created, they will actually be sharing the same network, and as a result, they will be able to call each other through their service names in the Docker Compose file. Also, using the header up directive, I'm actually setting a header to the requests that will be sent from the Caddy to the backend server, and I'm setting the host header with some value right over here. So until now, we should be able to actually allow the requests that are using these two API keys and implement the reverse proxy as our desired state. So for the requests that are actually not having these two API keys in their headers on the authorization header actually, so again we can actually match those requests using the not directive and again checking the headers, the authorization header with the exact same values. So using this matcher will actually match all the requests that are not having these two API keys in their requests headers. So lastly, right over here, using the respond directive, we can actually respond with some status code and with some static response if this matcher returns true, which will mean that the requests that are not having these two authorization headers in their header section. So right now I've got my Caddyfile and my Docker Compose file ready for my Caddy server to be up, and I'll move to the terminal right over here. I'll hit ls to make sure I'm in the exact same directory that I've got my configuration files, and by saying Docker Compose up -d, as I'm expecting, my two containers should be up and running with a network attaching to these two containers. So if I say Docker Compose ps, I should be able to see the containers that are created by this Docker Compose file, and by checking the status column, I'm seeing that both my containers are up with the exact same ports mapped to inside the containers. So I'll say Docker Compose logs -f to follow the logs and --tail 100 to actually grab the latest 100 lines of the outputted logs of these two containers. So I'll hit enter, and as I can see, things are looking good, and right now I should be able to actually make requests to the Caddy server. So using another terminal, I'll try to make requests using curl. So I'll say curl and provide with the address of the machine that is actually hosting my Caddy container, and I'll provide /API, and if I hit enter, I should be able to see the exact stats code that I defined in the Caddy file for the requests that does not have the authorization headers with my defined values. So again, by using the curl, I'll try to set an header, which will be the authorization header, and I'll set it to bearer key 1, which is again the same key that I defined in my Caddy file. So I'll hit enter, and this time I should be able to receive the response from the echo server echoing the detail of my request. So again, it should be the exact same for the key 2, and also if I provide it with some incorrect API keys, I'll hit enter, and again you can see that successfully returning some error status code exactly based on our configuration in the Caddy file. So that's all for this video. I hope you learned something new in this one, integrating this with other features that Caddy provides, like for example limiting the client's IP addresses or putting some other authentication mechanisms. You will eventually end up with a more secured Caddy server. So if you have any questions, any recommendations, go ahead and ask me in the comment section down below. And if you haven't watched the previous videos, I recommend you give a visit if you're interested in deep diving in Caddy as a container. So if you found the video interesting, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, which will help grow the channel and motivate me to create more free contents like this. And with that, that's all for this video, and I hope to see you in the next videos.